Hey guys, welcome back. So now coming back from a bit of a break or hiatus, I really just needed some time this weekend, like a few days. But just to be a little transparent with you guys, my mom has been battling cancer for close to 4 years now, and she's still hanging in there, so I thank God for that. But for me personally, it's just been a rough past few days. And usually for myself, I'll have my ups and downs, and when I have my downs, you just won't hear from me. But usually when I do, I'll just be quiet and nobody knows what's going on. So recently, I just kind of had to take a breather and just help myself for a few days. But with coming back and jumping right back into Joker War, there are 3 reasons in particular why I really appreciated this issue with Batman issue 98. And I really feel like James Tynion, with part 4 of this series, he did 3 big things in this issue that I really liked. And I'll kind of highlight those as we talk about it, because for 2 of them, I was kind of like, so when is blank gonna happen? But he covers them here, which is a good thing. So let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so jumping right back in to where at this time the streets are just going crazy. Clown Hunter, he's out there literally splitting wigs and becoming vengeance in his own way. But what I like here is that we really don't get too much into that. But instead, we then hop over to Catwoman and the Penguin over at Iceberg Lounge, which once again is like the spot where the villains who are just sitting this one out and they're just laying low watching Gotham go to hell in a handbasket. But what I like is that we finally see Selina, because I just feel like it's been a while since we've seen her back in Batman issue 94. But even at this time when we do, it hasn't been shoehorned in or anything like that. Because essentially when she's down here, she's watching the news and seeing all the chaos out in the streets with the Joker is causing, and while she's seeing it, she realizes that this is her fault. She handed the Joker the money to fund this war. But then the Penguin's like, nah, don't stop there. And he just takes it to another level and tells her nah, you gave him the money to win this war. Because with all this breaking news left or right, there's no sign of Bruce or Batman. And this worries Selina even more. But at this point, we know that Harley Quinn has taken Bruce over to Eden, which is really Harley's personal Fortress of Solitude, which was created for her by Poison Ivy. And with her bringing Bruce here at this time, it's really not to be brushed over that she had brought him here, because really this place was designed for Harley. This is supposed to be her personal space and her place for healing. But with seeing the condition that Bruce was in, she brought him here and gave him the craziest version of a flat tummy detox tea in order to purge him of the Punchline toxin and get his head straight, which then brought Bruce to see Alfred again, but this time as if he was really there, and mainly because the detox will make the symptoms worse before they get better. But even still, I thought it was huge that Harley had brought Bruce here in order to help with his recovery, much like how she had came here to get over the Joker. But this time around with Bruce seeing Alfred, we see them going into the Batcave, and Bruce is crafting out new batarangs and more or less finding a way to make them more compact. But also in this case, instead of going to the future, it's almost like a trip to the past. And this hallucination comes off in a very butterfly effect type of way, because though the conversation starts off like your early years of Batman and him upgrading his suit and making the entire suit have more functionality and not just the belt or the batarangs, but even as the conversation continues, seeming within the time of these early years, Bruce then starts to come to the awareness of what's really going on, and it's here where this Alfred tells him that he really needs to take this time to step away from all the madness that's going on and have a conversation with Bruce that's very much needed in this moment. But on the outside world, Harley Quinn, she's been going back and forth and kind of looking after him, and at this time she's also reaching out to Poison Ivy, hoping that wherever she is, she can hopefully hear Harley through the plants and hopefully make her way there to wake up Batman sooner. And it's kind of funny with her responding to Bruce talking in his sleep, and he's talking about he want more tea and how he's walking to the kitchen, and she's like, oh goodness, now he got the munchies. But while she's looking after him here and she's also reaching out to Poison Ivy, she hears a response, but instead it is Punchline. And it's pretty crazy because the whole versus between Punchline and Harley, at this current point, it's been modeled very much around Punchline pushing Harley out of her comfort zone. And it's that's turned up even more with Punchline appearing here in Eden, which is supposed to be Harley's secret place of refuge, and showing up with a flamethrower ready to burn the whole place down. Because for Punchline, doing that in a literal sense, for her to really pull that off, it would be the perfect metaphor to what she's trying to do to Harley Quinn. But even still, with her doing this now, it couldn't be the worst time, because Batman, who's 6'3" and 230 pounds or whatever, he's still knocked out on the ground. But out of those 3 things that I mentioned earlier that I feel I really liked a lot about this issue, And the first is finally seeing where Selena was, but here where we go again into this conversation between Bruce and Alfred. Like for one, early on it's made very clear that Bruce is aware that Alfred is truly dead, but much like how he mentioned before at the theater, he leans into this and he takes it for what it is in order to sort out these issues and come to grips with some sort of a resolve by way of this hallucination which appears to be Alfred. But also in this case, and kind of like before, it's also made clear that this is a version of Alfred that's been put together in Bruce's mind out of the sum of a lifetime of experiences. And we see this even more when he walks Bruce from the cave to the kitchen and he makes Bruce this blend of Darjeeling tea, which this Alfred makes for him after he told Alfred that Harley had made him some tea, and because of that Bruce is aware that he's hallucinating. But with Alfred making Bruce this tea, it's almost like us seeing Bruce come across this balancing act of simultaneously accepting Alfred's death, but also using this moment to reach deeper truths. And with doing so, imagining that he's drinking the tea that Alfred would make him in moments when he was most disturbed or frightened. But with doing this, it's here that Bruce opens up and he tells Alfred everything that's going on, with the Joker taking Lucius Fox, the family's fortune, and the tragedy of his parents' death, and he's turned it all around on Gotham, which will definitely soon cost the life of thousands. But Alfred quickly turns this around because he lets Bruce know something that Bruce has known deep down for the longest time, because the Joker is essentially his opposite. And like with family, for example, which means everything to Bruce, but for the Joker, it means nothing. And for the Joker, killing one person is the same as killing 1,000, or even 1,000,000 for that matter. And to me, really, those polarizing differences between the Batman and Joker that make them so different from one another, like they also make them very similar in a number of ways, because not everyone believes that one person's death is just the same as 1,000,000, but both Batman and the Joker, they both think those are the same thing. And of course, obviously with one thinking it's nothing and the other thinking it's everything. But from here, jumping back to Harley and Punchline, like while Bruce is in that dreamland, Harley is lugging this dude around and keeping him from not getting incinerated. But eventually Harley, she shoots the flamethrower and it evens the playing field a little bit, and this sets us up for the real Harley Quinn versus Punchline round 2. Which really feels like it's taken to another level with everything that we've learned about the two of them so far. Because on one hand, for Harley, we've known her origin for some time, so that part's not new. And this is that third thing, by the way, that I was talking about, as far as what I like that we got in this issue. Because really, the Harley Quinn versus Punchline thing, it could have been like real shallow, it could have been just a jealousy thing, but I feel like it's a lot more. And that's what I like about it. Because when we had talked about with the tie-ins and everything that Harley had went through after the first go around with Punchline, to where she really started second-guessing herself. Like for one, that showed us another side of Harley, like she wouldn't just openly show like on her own. But it took a moment to where this Punchline came along, to where on the surface, Punchline appeared to be a representation of what Harley thought she was supposed to be, with her being more serious and devoted to the Joker instead of trying to fix him, amongst a number of other things which initially messed with Harley, like they really bothered her. But it's like with that, in addition to Batman issue 98, that we're showing even more about Harley in the fact that at one point in time when she was with the Joker, she believed that not only could the Joker be eventually cured, but early on she believed when she was with the Joker that if she killed Batman, that would then fix the Joker. But in the case of Punchline, whose origin we also get a bit more of in the Joker 80th anniversary special, which really at the time was more so her initiation, so to speak. But in the case of Punchline, even furthermore, she is the Batman to Harley Quinn's Joker. Because with Batman being dark but good and the Joker being bright but evil, but it's like now with Punchline you have Harley who is bright and good, and you have Punchline who is dark and evil. But the two of them nonetheless are byproducts of the Joker. But for Punchline, rather than having known the Joker, she had pretty much just seen him on YouTube, was like, you know what, I like that guy and I dig what he's into. But not only did she like and subscribe, but from there she just embodied everything that the Joker stood for. But in the case of Punchline, much like Harley had believed a long time ago, Punchline now believes that killing Batman is the solution. Because for Punchline, like where her ignorance lands, like for her, first of all, she believed that there's an ending. Because she thinks that with killing Batman, like that is the end game or the Punchline that'll truly fulfill what the Joker wants. But at least at this point, Harley has grown to the place where she at least understands, to where she thought the Joker had a heart and she was wrong. And for Punchline, who believes that the Joker has this super intelligent brain that's looking for a resolve or an ending, but that's where Punchline's wrong. And Harley tells her like there's nothing specifically that the Joker believes in, like he's just a manipulator and Punchline is being manipulated. But on top of telling Punchline all of this and out of sheer love, there's also the addition to last time that they had met and Harley had lost, to where Harley kind of got something to prove right now. So for that reason, she then kind of goes off the rails, and she makes very clear, like in this go round, like she's not holding back on Punchline at all. But even when doing this, Punchline sees Batman just laying out there far off. She gets a hit in on on Harley, and she's like, you know what, I'm gonna prove you wrong and kill Batman right now and show Harley that the Joker is who Punchline believed him to be. But even still at this point, with Bruce out cold, Alfred continues to tell him like these ideals which Bruce is holding on to, with everything that he's pulled together throughout his life and traveling the world, and use it all to save everyone with becoming Batman. And to put it in simple terms, this is a child's dream. But even with that being the case, it's a dream that Bruce needs to hold on to in some form or way as he continues. And how exactly to do that is something that Bruce needs to figure out. Because even with him learning how to break different bones all over people's bodies and taking upon himself the promise that he's made from a boy to save everyone, like Alfred tells him like that promise alone has crushed Bruce more than any physical damage that he's inflicted on anyone. And Alfred even goes on to explain like since Alfred's death, Bruce has really just come to one of his lowest points, especially with the way that he's treated his new family ever since. And this is something I feel like James Tynion also did a really great job of expressing back in the Batman Pennyworth RIP one-shot, when we had seen the different ways that Bruce had handled the members of the Bat family right after Alfred's death, and how he subconsciously held it against them in so many different ways. Because even at that time when Rick Grayson and Bruce finally sat down and talked, like initially Bruce held it against Richard since he wasn't himself at the time and that he wasn't there to help during City of Bane, which Barbara kind of turned into a huge argument after the funeral before Bruce had caught up with them after. But after everyone except for Richard had left and him and Bruce got a bit of a sit down, it was really in that moment where you got to see that emotionally Bruce just couldn't hold them together, and understandably so because Alfred had just passed. But this Alfred goes on to express that Bruce has been that way, and it's only increasing, because with Bruce being afraid to be in love and have someone to come home to, and then on top of that transform the city into something darker, because that's what Bruce believed he needed to do in order to save it, which I feel like is kind of a callback to the Dark Designs and Bruce trying to be a better Batman. But ultimately with hearing all this, Bruce is just like, look, I failed, and Alfred shuts that down quickly. Because the last thing that Bruce needs to do is quit, especially in a time like now when the city needs him the most. But also with doing this, he has to accept at times that he'll fail. And more importantly, what Bruce believes is his biggest failure at the moment, with that being letting Alfred die. But Alfred lets him know that he needs to keep being this impossible man and keep reaching for that unreachable. And in response, Bruce is like, look, I just can't do it alone. And Alfred is just like, well then don't. Because you have a family through Damian, through Barbara Gordon, Rick Grayson, and you have love with Selina Kyle. And for those reasons, he can continue and not have to do this alone. And those words are like the Alfred speech that wakes him up and take down Punchline just before she can kill him in his sleep. But it's also here where we get a clearer picture of what Bruce had got out of that conversation with Alfred, which ultimately was like a conversation of him coming to a resolve within himself. But ultimately it was him coming to the conclusion that he should continue to be Batman, but now even more than ever embracing the family and the loved ones who have come to join him along the way. And with doing this, he picks up Punchline and he tells Harley that he needs to reactivate his communication system, and with doing so, it's really just something as simple as changing the battery in his utility belt. And he jokes with Harley, telling her he calls it a Bat Terry, which probably sits somewhere between the heaterangs and the harderangs. But when his communication system is back up and he makes the call to locate the family, it's here where we find out when he says that he means everyone. And when he says that, I really feel like it's gonna be a Batman Endgame moment coming up in Joker War at some point, like with everyone who's ever allied with Batman ever all teaming up with him at the same time. But after this, we then jump back over to Selina at the Iceberg Lounge, and at this point she's tired of just watching and she tells the Penguin that she's leaving. And of course in his response, he reiterates that that's not the best idea. But on top of that, she not only lets the Penguin know that he's also coming, but the Riddler, he's coming along too. And it's kind of funny, like when the Penguin asks her like why would she want to go out in the middle of this Joker War, because right here his silhouette kind of looks like Batman. But when he asks Selina this question, she asks him a question in return, and when doing so, imposing the question, what if I can make you a billionaire? Which for the Penguin, like who knows where he would take that. But in the case of the Riddler, like in this moment, and even though I'm sure Selina is mainly talking to the Penguin, but for the Riddler, like in this moment, I can imagine he's thinking like, you know what? I could put 243,000 Riddler trophies around the city, and there would be no way Batman could find those. But real quick, special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link down below to where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.